So, you're interested in doing community access and you want to do it well. Whether you're wanting to partner with someone who's an environmentalist, a health guru, or someone who wants to be a small-time poet, it's important to keep a few details in mind. The 4 principles that I use in my work with community access are to promote competency, that image matters, relationships are everything, and make contribution happen. When I say promote competency, what I mean is that we are trying to work alongside the person so that they are able to build up the skills that they will need in order to successfully connect with the community in whatever way works for them. So, the way to do that is to make sure that through every aspect of community access, we are including the person in sending emails, making phone calls, making decisions. And that can look different for each person. Let's take sending an email, for instance. For some people, it might be possible for them to type up the email themselves physically. They might also be responsible for and able to come up with all of the information that goes into the email, and you're just simply sitting there as like a bystander to kind of give some feedback if necessary. For other people, it might be more important that you physically type the email for them, but they might delegate that to you. Even if the person is not able to fully participate in the development of an email, having their own email account will give them greater access to community. When connecting in with the community, you have to consider where the person is, what their experiences are, and what needs to be explored with the person to help make sure that they are more competent. Take Joel at the farmer's market, for instance. Joel knew that he wanted to get involved in environmental justice and connecting with the local food movement. He started going to the farmer's market and over time developed enough of a relationship where he was able to say, okay, I would like to sell sodas. There is a need here for selling local sodas. So, a lot of Joel's support around being successful as a vendor at the farmer's market was to make sure that he knew how to speak with patrons and other vendors at the farmer's market. It was important for him to learn how to handle money or to handle money with the support that he needed in order to do so successfully. And it was also important for Joel to be involved in joining up with the board of that farmer's market. In all of those exciting opportunities, one of the things that we overlooked as a team was making sure that Joel was involved in every aspect of the farmer's market and selling sodas at the farmer's market. And so what we realized is that we needed to make sure that when people were going to the grocery store to buy these local sodas, Joel was present with them and making sure that Joel had the opportunity to sit down and do inventory and see how many sodas he had, compare that to how many sodas he sold so that he can make the decision on what needed to be bought and try and get an idea of what was a success in that. And so it's important to remember that we're not going to get it 100% right when we talk about competence for people, and people are not going to be 100% ready every time you try to get them connected into something, an awesome opportunity in the community. But it is important to remember that we need to keep our eyes open to where we need to be focusing, developing those competencies and helping people to be successful. And now, other things to consider when we talk about promoting competency is making sure that people even have what it is that they need to go into a certain environment. For instance, does the person have a state ID? I cannot tell you how many people I started working with who were in their 50s, who were in their 20s, who did not have that state ID. Another area that we need to be considering with promoting competency is making sure people have communication at hand that works for them. One of the things that was very important for us was recognizing that people have to have access to cell phones. And so we worked with several people to make sure that they had access to that. So when considering cell phones, it's not only the service that's important, it's also important to think about the accessibility of the cell phone for the person you're working with. So for instance, it might be that you need to make sure that the buttons are larger, or maybe do they even have to have buttons? Is it better for the person to access the phone without them? And so finding the right one for the person that you're partnering with is extremely important. And it's also important to make sure that you practice it with them, to make sure that they have an opportunity to make phone calls, that they're answering phone calls when you make phone calls towards them. When I say that image matters, I mean thinking about if you are someone who is trying to connect up with others in the community. Let's say if you're going for a job interview, let's say that you're going to a new group of people who are going to get together and cook every week. When we are doing those things, it's important for us to look the part. And so 3 areas that we like to focus on at Mattingly Edge with regard to image is what is the image of the people who are part of that group already? What is the image of the person who is going into that group? And also, what is the image of the supporter who is going into the group with the person? We'd like to start in thinking about image by looking at what the group is. So, again, it might be the case that the person is wanting to go to the local coffee shop or to the local bar. Getting an idea and a feel for what that group is doing and what their image is going to be very important. And keeping in mind that if there's a little bit of confusion about how people dress or how people portray themselves in a certain situation, it's going to be more important in those situations to dress more towards the conservative side. I say this because it's important to remember that the people that we are partnering with are automatically judged at a level far greater than the typical community. As a rule of thumb, we as supporters should be encouraging people to avoid clothing that depicts childlike images such as Mickey Mouse or the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The reason that we ask people to avoid those childlike images is because we have to recognize the history of people, men and women who experience disabilities, and recognize that a very common role that people are cast into who experience disabilities is that of the eternal child. That people see the men and women that I partner with a lot as children. And so again, keeping in mind and recognizing that we need to make sure it is our role, it is our duty to ensure that the person is seen respectfully and is afforded the opportunity to connect with others. It is our role to make sure that we are addressing that with people. And the reality is that you are going to run into several supporters or other people who say, well, we shouldn't tell people what they need to wear. And again, we're not telling people what they need to wear, but we are talking about the consequences of what people choose to wear with them. And people who argue that people should be accepted for no matter what it is that they might be wearing or associating with or what have you, those supporters and others are not going to be successful with community access because, again, whether it's right or wrong, the reality is that society judges. And it is our role as community access providers to make sure people have that knowledge and have the opportunity to make decisions around utilizing that knowledge. We also need to be talking about what it is that the supporter is wearing because, again, like if we're going to have strong standards for the men and women that we're partnering with, we obviously have to have strong standards for ourselves. Let's say that I work with 3 different people in a given day. So I might carry 3 different outfits with me in a single day. I would have to wear a gym clothing to the gym when I'm over with Chris. I might wear jeans with Joel at the farmer's market. I might wear khakis and a button-up with Graham at the bar. It's important to keep in mind that it is my responsibility to make sure that I am portraying the correct image when I'm going out with each person. Because I need to be out doing body pump with Chris. I need to be in the vendor section with Joel. I need to make sure that I'm not looking like I'm standing off to the side, observing the person or supervising the person, because again, that's going to create another image similar to the child image that we talked about earlier. If I were to not wear the appropriate attire for a specific instance, I would look odd. And if I look odd, that image immediately transfers to the person I'm with. And I would also like to say that sweatpants are never acceptable in any situation. So relationships are everything. What I mean by that is that relationships should be the criteria for which you're basing the success of whatever you're doing with the person you're partnering with. You could have the most exciting experience where the person has interests with shared interests with other people, where the person might even have an opportunity to shine a little bit. But at the end of the day, if the person is not connecting with other people, then it's not necessarily a successful venture. So relationships start early. We talk a lot about the relationships that supporters develop with the person that they're partnering with. Of course, we need to make sure that the match that we're making, especially within community access, is a strong match, where the people have an affinity toward each other and are vested in making sure whatever they're doing together is successful. But it is important to keep in mind that we are not paying people to be friends with the people that they're supporting. So I always like to tell people that, it's okay to be friendly and to articulate that with the person, but if we're helping to help people develop relationships, we need to make sure that we recognize that the relationships that they've had throughout their lives have primarily been with family and other caregivers or people who support them. And so with that in mind, understanding what it means to be an actual friend is something completely different from that. Having a strong supporter relationship is going to be important, especially because if the person is able to articulate why they really enjoy the person they're partnering with, they're going to be able to use that when they're talking with others in the community or when they're supporting that person in the community. Again, when I am trying to connect a person in the community, one of the most important things that I can do is make sure that the person is establishing consistency in the group or with the people that I'm trying to connect that person with. Consistency is paramount. It's almost as important, if not as important, as having matched interests with the group of people that are coming together, or showing up regularly with the same people gives people an opportunity to make connections with one another. So it is, again, very important that people are being supported to do that. I also like to make sure that when the person is getting connected with the group, that they are getting connected with those in the group that make the most sense. So for instance, it might be the teacher or the organizer of the group, if it's a smaller group in particular. So we might get to a class early so that the person has an opportunity to either set out chairs with the person or have me as the supporter set out those chairs if they are not physically able to do so. Because it gives them an opportunity to share time with that instructor or host, and has an opportunity for that host to maybe be an advocate for the person within the group. I also like to keep my eyes out for the member or members of the group who are interested in doing more than just spending time within that space, within that class, for instance, with the person. They might be interested, I'd love to go get some coffee with you and everything. So outside of consistency, doing something extra is very important as well. And that leads nicely into the last section that I'd like to go over with you today. Make contribution happen. It is important that if the person is going out to coffee with a fellow member of a group or what have you, you're going to have situations where that member doesn't want to impose upon the person you're partnering with. They might say, I will get the coffee, or I'll always get the coffee. But what happens in that situation is you set up a situation where charity happens, not contribution. So it's important to have conversations with the person that you're partnering with about, hey, Cindy has bought coffee for you a couple of times. It's important to make sure that we're getting away from her doing that all the time to where maybe you're paying for your own coffee at least. But it's also nice to treat Cindy from time to time, because who doesn't like to be treated? Contribution is one of the pillars of success for community access. And its contribution is important for any person, but particularly for the men and women we are partnering with.